Okay guys, today is an exciting day. It is going to be my first video not talking about Apocalypse or Genesis at all. I feel like I've gone way in depth on them in my past, 6 videos that you guys should know how to play them, how to play around them, and what to do whenever you're faced with that situation. They are not broken, just know that you are going to have to plan for them going forward. And going forward for this channel, we are going to start delving into each of the major keywords that people love to play and try to make them meta, try to make them viable in the meta of today. And what we're going to start with is Avengers. Now, Avengers is the keyword that I played when I went to Worlds, and I played it because of Scarlet Witch. I pulled Scarlet Witch from my Disney Plus brick, extremely lucky, and as soon as I did, I started building around Mystical. And when I started planning for Worlds, I found that the main issue that you run into with Mystical is there's not a good leadership piece for you to put on the team, at least not yet, and the there isn't a solid follow-up attacker besides Scarlet Witch. Anytime that Scarlet Witch would drop her rune, I was left with attacking with Felix Faust, which, you don't generally want to attack with Felix Faust, but he can, or Richter. And really, Richter's Quake is only good for softening up your opponent's support pieces so that you can go in there and take care of the big boys with, your main damage dealers. So outside of Mystical, she also has the Avengers keyword, and I started diving into that, got my hands on a Sicarian Iron Man, and all of a sudden I had, almost half of a team worth of extremely meta viable pieces. Now, this is all before X of Swords came out, and I started I started building around these two characters, and Scarlet Witch is a one-for-one swap with the super rare Captain America from Avengers Fantastic Four Empire. And so Avengers swap, I'm just going to go into this real fast because this is something that I feel like it's needed an errata forever, and it's not going to get one, and I just have to live with this. So Captain America, his Avengers swap, you have to run two Captain Americas to make sure that you don't end up with a Captain America on your force. Now, Captain America isn't a bad piece. He does have enhancement. He does have traded leadership, but that 40 points is a lot more useful elsewhere. And with the other swaps, you're able to turn the 25-point Magneto into something incredibly, viable for your team. And the 40-point Magneto, you don't necessarily need to swap him out, but and the Invisible Woman for Fantastic Four can also swap herself out, and the only one that can't is Captain America, and it drives me nuts. So you have to run two of them. So I was kind of stuck here, and I knew I had a good one-for-one swap for Cap with Scarlet Witch, and then after that, it just turned into a bunch of math. Man, I was losing my mind just trying to find the right pieces to go into it, and there wasn't really a very solid option for me. And then X of Swords dropped. And when X of Swords dropped, we got a piece called Hope Summers. And Hope Summers is a godsend for Avengers. She is a one-for-one swap with the low point Captain America. She has stealth, TK, energy shield deflection, and leadership. So you have your leadership down. She can also pick powers. And as soon as I put her on a team with Sakari and Scarlet, it started playing like the old days with Goblin King and Jakeem Thunder and Unimind, where I'm just picking powers with everything at the beginning of my turn, or in the middle of my turn with Hope Summers. And man, it felt so good. I knew I could win rounds with just this 165 points worth of pieces. Um, then going forward, as I was playtesting, I wanted to make sure that my opponent couldn't steal my cloak because Sicarian Iron Man, as much as he relies on the sidestep, he relies on that plasticity and flight just as much. So giving him, throwing the number 100 Spider-Man and paying the 5 points for his trait made sure that I could swap into Sicarian Iron Man and make sure that I could equip the cloak first turn. So my team, my main force was double cap, 1 at 75, 1 at 40, the Spider-Man for 50, and then his trait for the cloak, which made it 55 points. And that's 170 points worth of viable Avengers left me 130 points to mess around with. And I came down to two different lines of thinking. I wanted to go Hulkling at first to get another attacker in there because that's just the way I think. And I felt like I had enough support with, Sakari and Iron Man's Perplex and Outwit. Hope Summers can take Perplex and Outwit from him, or she can take PC from Scarlet Witch because Scarlet Witch can choose to use PC, Perplex, or Outwit, any two of those. So I felt like I had enough support. So I was going into Hulkling, and it ended up being Hulkling, Hulk, and a 30-point piece, and that's kind of where I got stuck, was Mr. Fantastic or Scarlet Witch. So that was one option, and the main issue I found with this option was whenever I did run Hulkling, he tended to get, left out of the action. I don't know why. Maybe it's just the way I played him, and with a little bit more playtesting, it could have worked. But I just found through all this that, man, having great attackers is awesome, but when you have too many of them, you only have so many actions to get them up into the action. And the another issue that I had was getting rid of barrier and at the same time making sure that I was placed correctly. So Scarlet Witch is great for, moving your characters around the board and placing them into optimal situations, but to play her, I had to forego Mr. Fantastic, which was my piece to take away barrier and lock down pieces like Thanos. So I had to go one or the other, and I didn't enjoy that at all. So the other option I found, and this is the option I ended up going with, and even this wasn't that great, it was Invisible Woman, Black Widow, and a 30-point piece. Now this allowed me to have triple TK if I wanted it with Scarlet Witch. Everyone has stealth, and I have a 19 defend. Now 19 defend sounds great, but when your 19 defend piece is only 5 clicks long and super easy to kill, then it starts to become an issue. So Invisible Woman almost always died first because that's what good players do, and I was just left with Black Widow. And Black Widow, whenever I played her, usually ended up being 50 points of just sitting in the back, just granting all my characters stealth, which is great, but I don't think it's 50 points great. So this wasn't, a very viable meta play for the last 130 points. And man, it took me a lot longer than I'm willing to admit to say that I found the piece that made it all work. It's Morgan Le Fay from the Legacy card from Future Foundations. Now, Morgan Le Fay is great because of her trait that says, when establishing theme teams, you may treat Avengers and Latveria as a single named keyword. So, with Morgan Le Fay, she does have the Avengers keyword, so I was able to swap her out for whatever 50-point piece I wanted to use, whether it be Black Widow in the right situations or Invisible Woman for her 19 defend. And I'm also able to bring in another keyword that has incredible meta viability. I mean, you could go the Doom routes, but at this point I only had 80 points to play with, and I wanted to make sure that I got Molecule Man on the team because he is a solid barrier piece as well as taking away my opponent's barrier. And I didn't really have a decent barrier outside of Invisible Woman. And when you have barrier and TK on the same character, you're generally having to pick one. So this gave me a barrier piece that, I didn't have to worry about him needing to use another action. I mean, it's Molecule Man. He's amazing. So I went Molecule Man, and then I was looking for another piece with the Latveria keyword that was under, that was 50 points or under. And there's not that many of them, to be honest. I mean, you get both of the Valerias, but Valeria Richards requires your characters to have one of her keywords, and the only person that she was able to perplex up by 2 is generally Sakari and Iron Man. So that wasn't that great, because he's already modifying his combat values by 2, so I didn't really like her. And then Valeria Von Doom gave me another leadership. She took care of Colossal Retaliators, but there's not that, like I said before, with Mystical being viable, there's not that much Colossal Retaliation in the game. So I wasn't really sold on either of those, so I went Demon in an Armor. Demon in an Armor is 50 points, and he really works with a 19 defend. So my general swap was into Invisible Woman. So Demon in an Armor, let's read his trait real fast. When a friendly character within range is attacked, the attacker cannot positively modify or replace their attack value. So pieces like Thanos, with their 13 attack, even if they want to mind control me across the board, they have to get through my 19 defend without increasing their attack. So usually I was able to perplex up a couple pieces with Sicarian Iron Man, Scarlet Witch, and Hope, and it left Thanos with usually trying to roll a 7, because as you playtest with this team, you start to find out which pieces that Thanos wants to go after with his mind control. And then once he does hit with the mind control, that piece then has to hit that 19 defend. And this really worked because the main piece that Thanos would want to mind control is Sicarian Iron Man, because he's my main attacker. But Demon in Armor works so that the interaction between Demon in Armor and Sicarian Iron Man works so that Sicarian would only be hitting with a 10 attack, because Sicarian modifies his combat values by +1 for each object on his card. So because he cannot modify his attack, whenever they do mind control Sicarian Iron Man and he attacks one of my friendly characters, he cannot modify his attack value. So this really helped protect my team against Thanos and protected myself as I got across the board. Because this team, while I could alpha with this team, this was really, a third turn attacking team, because that's when I could get all my pieces over to my opponent's side of the board. Now, while I was building this team, there are a couple great Avengers that I got to playtest with, but I didn't end up putting them on my final team. Those do include the common Hulkling from Empire. He granted all my characters Mastermind, but they could only Mastermind to him. This was great. Anytime you can grant a character Mastermind, as we've seen with Apocalypse, it's insanely good. And he was definitely in the top cut of making this team, but at the end of the day, it ended up being another 50-point piece that just sat back and got hit. So I didn't go with him. And then another piece was Party Thor, and he was generally my secondary swap for Invisible Woman. He is incredibly good. I, you know, I he doesn't look that great on paper because he's not protected outwit. He only has a 2 damage, this, that, and the other, but his pulse wave mechanic is insanely good. Not only can you pulse wave your opponent, but at the same time you give them action tokens, and then anytime he's got willpower on 4 through 6, and anytime he hits it, he heals a click. So Party Thor is an insanely good piece, probably the best attacker for Avengers outside of Sicarian Iron Man and Scarlet Witch. And, uh, I hesitate to say that he's better than everybody else, but this piece is great. If you do plan on going Avengers, I encourage you guys to playtest with Party Thor. And if you can't get your hands on the Sicarian Iron Man, he is a close second. He doesn't deal the same amount of damage, but if you can just tie your opponent up enough for, another piece to come over and dish out the damage, then that works just as well. This is Avengers, guys, and this is a breakdown of how I found my team. There's a lot of moving parts to the meta these days. Every keyword is viable. Most pieces can work for, any keyword nowadays, especially with all the keyword manipulation. And I was extremely happy with this team. It didn't do as well as I'd hoped, but it did do extremely well compared to, the top tier meta. And at the end of the day, if it can compete with those pieces, then I was extremely happy with it. I don't feel like I piloted this team to the best of my ability. I made a few mistakes along the way, and I went into the final round 3-2 and ended up going against basically a mirror team with Sicarian Iron Man and Demon in Armor on his force. So it ended up being really hard to get points against that guy, and I just didn't make the final cut. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys have a keyword that you guys want me to delve into in my next video, please comment it down below and I'll make sure I get to it immediately. I hope you guys all have a great week and peace.